three crises converge on one nation. Venezuela's military aligns with Russia and China. Venezuelan oil flows to Beijing instead of Houston. Venezuelan politics threaten American elections in Florida. The temperature rises weekly. January brings naval deployments. February sees reconnaissance flights triple. March could bring something worse. This isn't one conflict. This is three conflicts happening simultaneously in the same place. And they're all reaching critical mass at the exact same time. The military dimension exploded on January 18th when satellite imagery confirmed Russian S-400 air defense systems arrived in Venezuela. Not S-300, S-400. These are Russia's most advanced export systems. They can track 300 targets simultaneously and engage 36 at once. The radar detects stealth aircraft at 150 miles. This isn't defensive equipment. This is area denial capability designed specifically to threaten American aircraft. Two S-400 batteries, positioned near Caracas and Maracaibo, create no-fly zones that complicate any American air operation. Russia didn't sell these systems. They deployed them with Russian crews. That means Russian military personnel will operate air defense targeting American aircraft if conflict starts. That's direct Russian-American confrontation, using Venezuela as the battlefield. Chinese military presence is equally concerning, but more subtle. 15 Chinese military advisors arrived in December. They're not combat troops. They're signals intelligence specialists. They installed equipment at 3 Venezuelan bases that monitor American communications from Florida, Gulf Coast installations, and Caribbean operations. Every American military radio transmission in the region gets intercepted and analyzed in real time. The intelligence flows to Beijing, where analysts build detailed pictures of American operational patterns. When China plans Taiwan operations, this Venezuelan intelligence provides understanding of how American forces communicate, coordinate, and respond to crises. Venezuela became Chinese listening post, aimed directly at American homeland. Iranian involvement adds third hostile power. Tehran shipped weapons to Caracas in November. The cargo included Shahed 136 kamikaze drones. These are the same drones Russia uses against Ukraine. Simple, cheap, effective. Venezuela received 200 drones plus training for operators. These drones have one 200-mile range. From Venezuelan territory, they can reach American oil facilities in Texas and Louisiana. They can hit the Panama Canal. They can strike shipping in the Caribbean. Iran gave Venezuela capability to attack American economic infrastructure without using military aircraft that would be shot down immediately. The asymmetric threat is real and growing. What's your assessment of this three-way alliance? Type A if you think it's a serious threat. Type B if you think it's overblown. The oil crisis intensified when OPEC production cuts pushed prices toward $95 per barrel in early January. Higher prices benefit Russia, hurt America. Venezuela aligned with OPEC cuts despite needing revenue desperately. Why would cash-starved Venezuela reduce production? Because Russia and China told them to. Venezuelan energy policy is now controlled by hostile powers, using it as weapon against American economy. Every dollar per barrel increase costs American consumers $4 billion annually. Venezuela's decision to restrict supply directly damages American economic interests while benefiting American adversaries. This is economic warfare, using oil as the weapon. Chinese oil purchases from Venezuela reached record levels, 650,000 barrels per day in December. That's 32% of Venezuelan production going to China. The oil ships via tanker across the Pacific. Payment happens in yuan, not dollars. This bypasses American financial system entirely. Venezuela receives Chinese currency it uses to purchase Chinese goods. The entire transaction excludes American participation. Washington loses both the oil and the economic leverage that comes from dollar-denominated trade. Chinese loans total $60 billion now. Venezuela will be repaying China for decades. That debt gives Beijing veto power over Venezuelan policy. America created this situation by imposing sanctions without offering alternative. China filled the vacuum. American refineries are suffering measurably. Gulf Coast refineries, designed for heavy crude, are running at 85% capacity. They're processing inferior alternatives. The complex coking units, built specifically for Venezuelan crude, sit underutilized. This isn't just corporate profits, this is jobs. Refinery workers in Texas and Louisiana face reduced hours or layoffs because optimal feedstock is sanctioned. These workers vote. They donate to political campaigns. They pressure elected officials for policy changes. The longer sanctions continue, the more economic pain accumulates in politically important states. If you're enjoying this deep dive into modern warfare, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. The political dimension is most explosive. Florida has 2.1 million Venezuelan Americans. That's 9.5% of Florida's population, concentrated in Miami-Dade and Broward counties. These voters are mobilized, organized, and passionate about Venezuelan regime change. They form political action committees. They fund candidates. They show up to vote. Florida is swing state that decides presidential elections. Winning Florida requires winning Venezuelan American voters. That means candidates compete to propose toughest stance on Maduro. The political logic pushes toward confrontation regardless of strategic calculation. The situation got worse in December when opposition leader Maria Corina Machado was barred from running in Venezuelan elections. Maduro's government claimed technical violations. Everyone knows it's political suppression. Machado has overwhelming support among Venezuelan population and diaspora. Blocking her candidacy means the July 2024 election will be neither free nor fair. This creates crisis for American policy. Accept the fraudulent election and lose credibility. Reject the election and face accusations of interfering in sovereign nations' politics. Either option creates political problems for whoever sits in the White House. Venezuelan diaspora calls for American intervention grew louder after Machado's disqualification. Protests outside White House demanded action. Congressional representatives from Florida introduced resolutions supporting regime change. Media coverage increased dramatically. Public opinion polls show 62% of Americans support democracy promotion. That support is vague and conditional, but it exists. Political leaders can invoke it if they decide intervention serves other interests. The domestic political infrastructure for military action is being constructed whether intentionally or organically. The election timing matters enormously. American presidential election happens November 2024. Venezuelan election happens July 2024. If Maduro steals the election in July, American politicians will face immediate pressure to respond strongly. Denouncing the fraud might be insufficient to satisfy Venezuelan American voters in Florida. They might demand concrete action. That creates political incentive for escalation right before American election. The calendar is forcing the issue, whether anyone wants it or not. Don't miss what comes next. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an analysis like this. The three dimensions reinforce each other in dangerous ways. Military buildup provides capability for intervention, oil crisis provides economic justification, political pressure provides domestic authorization. When all three align, intervention becomes much more likely. They're aligning now. Russian weapons deployment gives Pentagon argument that waiting increases military risk. Rising oil prices give economists argument that sanctions failed and alternatives are needed. Stolen Venezuelan election gives politicians argument that humanitarian intervention is morally necessary. The convergence creates conditions where what was unthinkable becomes possible, then probable. Regional dynamics add acceleration. Colombia's leftist president supports dialogue with Maduro. This infuriates Venezuelan opposition. It also annoys American policymakers who want regional pressure on Caracas. Brazil's Lula maintains friendly relations with Maduro despite disagreements. Again, this reduces regional pressure for change. Mexico stays neutral. Caribbean nations are divided. The regional coalition against Maduro that Washington wants doesn't exist. This isolation of diplomatic options makes military options more attractive by comparison. Guyana's territorial dispute with Venezuela adds combustible element. Venezuela claims Essequibo region, which is 60% of Guyana's territory, and contains significant oil deposits. Venezuela held referendum in December asserting sovereignty. This threatens Guyana, which has defense cooperation agreement with United States. American oil companies, including ExxonMobil, operate in disputed waters. If Venezuela moves militarily against Guyana, America faces obligation to respond. This creates second potential trigger for American military intervention, not direct attack on Venezuela, but defense of ally against Venezuelan aggression. The maritime boundary dispute over oil-rich waters between Venezuela and Guyana escalated in January. Venezuelan Navy increased patrols. Guyanese officials requested American support. U.S. Navy conducted freedom of navigation operations in the area. Venezuelan government protested. The situation contains all elements of accidental escalation. Ships operating in close proximity, unclear boundaries, high stakes, national pride. One collision or aggressive maneuver triggers crisis that spirals beyond control. What would you have done if commanding U.S. forces in this complex situation? Comment your answer below. Intelligence assessments paint concerning picture. CIA reports suggest Venezuelan military is deeply divided. Senior officers loyal to Maduro maintain control through patronage and fear. Junior officers and enlisted personnel are increasingly discontented. Economic collapse affects military families, food shortages, medical shortages, salary devaluation through inflation. Resentment builds. This creates opportunity for American policymakers. Support internal military coup rather than external invasion. It's cheaper, faster, and provides better optics. The military dimension of current crisis might be preparation not for American invasion, but for American support of Venezuelan military uprising. The coup scenario explains certain patterns. American special forces training with Colombian units near Venezuelan border, increased CIA activity in the region, quiet outreach to Venezuelan military officers, economic messaging emphasizing that sanctions would lift immediately after regime change. This is standard playbook for supported coup. Create conditions where military officers calculate they benefit more from removing current leader than defending him. If enough officers reach that calculation simultaneously, the coup succeeds without American forces crossing the border. But coups are unpredictable. They succeed until they don't. If coup attempt fails, Maduro purges the military. The opportunity closes. Worse, failed coup might prompt Maduro to take aggressive actions to rally nationalist support. Attack Guyana. Seize Colombian border territory. Create crisis that makes diplomatic resolution impossible. Failed coup sometimes leads to exactly the intervention it was supposed to avoid. The risk calculation is complex. Oil infrastructure targeting reveals strategic priorities. American intelligence closely monitors Venezuelan oil production facilities. Satellite imagery tracks repairs. Human intelligence reports on production levels. Signal intelligence intercepts communications about technical problems. This comprehensive monitoring serves multiple purposes. It helps calibrate sanctions effectiveness. It identifies which facilities are critical and which are redundant. It builds target packages if military operations become necessary. The intelligence collection is far more detailed than needed for diplomatic purposes. It's operational intelligence for military planning. This kind of detailed tactical breakdown takes hours to research. Subscribe to help us keep making them. The environmental catastrophe angle provides another justification. Venezuelan oil production uses outdated equipment. Environmental controls are minimal. Oil spills are common. In January, satellite imagery confirmed major spill in Lake Maracaibo. Thousands of barrels leaked. The environmental damage is severe. International environmental groups called for intervention to prevent further catastrophes. This provides humanitarian justification, distinct from political or economic arguments. Protecting environment and preventing ecological disaster sounds much better than securing oil supplies. But the result is identical. American forces control Venezuelan oil infrastructure. The refugee crisis strengthens intervention arguments. 7 million Venezuelans fled the country. That's 23% of the population. They're in Colombia, Brazil, Peru, Ecuador, Chile, and Central America. The humanitarian burden on neighboring countries is enormous. Colombia alone hosts 2.5 million Venezuelan refugees. This creates political instability in regional countries. It strains social services. It generates xenophobic backlash. The longer Venezuelan crisis continues, the worse regional instability becomes. Intervention sold as humanitarian act to enable refugee return finds support from countries desperate to reduce their refugee populations. American domestic politics show increasing polarization on Venezuela policy. Progressive Democrats oppose military intervention and want sanctions lifted. They emphasize humanitarian costs of sanctions. Conservative Republicans demand maximum pressure, including potential military action. They emphasize security threats from Russian and Chinese presence. The Biden administration tries to navigate this division, tough enough to satisfy Florida voters, restrained enough to avoid progressive rebellion. This political tightrope becomes impossible if Venezuelan election is stolen, and pressure for action becomes overwhelming from both directions. Financial sector interests add complexity. American banks hold billions in frozen Venezuelan assets. American companies have claims for expropriated property. If regime change occurs, these financial interests can be resolved favorably for American claimants. Current Venezuelan government will never pay. New government installed with American support would negotiate settlements. The financial incentive isn't primary motivation, but it reinforces other factors. Every major policy has winners and losers. In Venezuelan regime change scenario, American financial interests are clear winners. Your engagement directly shapes what we cover next. Drop a comment and subscribe. Technology transfer concerns are growing. Venezuelan government purchases Chinese surveillance technology, Huawei equipment installed throughout Venezuelan telecommunications infrastructure. This technology has backdoors that enable Chinese intelligence collection. Some of that collection targets American communications. The technology security threat is real. It's also useful justification for intervention. Protecting American national security from Chinese surveillance capabilities located 200 miles from Florida sounds compelling to voters concerned about Chinese threats. Nuclear angle remains speculative but concerning. Russia maintains nuclear cooperation agreement with Venezuela, ostensibly for peaceful nuclear power development. Intelligence agencies monitor this closely. Venezuela has uranium deposits, no enrichment capability currently. But Russian assistance could change that. The nightmare scenario is Venezuelan nuclear program supported by Russia and possibly Iran. That would be unacceptable to American policymakers. It would trigger immediate crisis requiring response. Intelligence analysts debate whether Venezuela is pursuing this path or whether cooperation remains peaceful. The uncertainty itself is destabilizing. Climate politics create strange bedfors. Environmental groups oppose fossil fuel development. But they also oppose authoritarian regimes. They support humanitarian intervention. Venezuelan situation forces choice. Some environmental organizations quietly support regime change, hoping new government adopts better environmental policies. Others oppose any intervention that might increase oil production. The environmental movement is split. This split reduces organized opposition to military action while providing potential environmental justification if framed correctly. The military logistics are in place, whether or not decision has been made, warships positioned, intelligence updated, alliances consulted, plans reviewed, target packages refined. The capability exists. Executing operation requires only political decision. That decision depends on triggering event that makes intervention politically necessary or convenient. Stolen election in July could be that trigger. Venezuelan attack on Guyana could be that trigger. Major terrorist attack traced to Venezuelan territory could be that trigger. The trigger mechanism is unknown, but the gun is definitely loaded and aimed. If you made it this far, you're the core of our community. Like, subscribe and hit that bell. The heating up of USA-Venezuela conflict is not accidental. It's not organic. It's orchestrated by multiple actors pursuing different objectives that happen to converge. Russia wants to distract America and gain leverage. China wants energy security and intelligence access. Iran wants to needle America and support fellow sanctioned state. Venezuelan government wants to survive. American hardliners want regime change. American oil companies want access to reserves. American politicians want Florida votes. These motivations are distinct but complementary. They create pressure from multiple directions simultaneously. The military component provides capability and creates urgency. Russian weapons deployments change risk calculation. Waiting becomes more dangerous as Venezuela's defenses improve. The oil component provides justification and benefits. Energy security is national security. The political component provides authorization and timing. Election cycles create windows for action. When these three factors align perfectly, intervention becomes very likely regardless of whether it's strategically wise. History suggests we're in dangerous phase. The rhetoric escalates. The military positioning intensifies. The economic pressure increases. The political pressure mounts. Eventually, something breaks. Either Venezuela's government collapses internally, or America intervenes externally. Or some third-party action triggers crisis that forces responses. The status quo is unstable. Unstable situations don't last. They resolve one way or another. The resolution is approaching faster than most people realize. The heating up is real. The indicators are everywhere: naval deployments, reconnaissance flights, intelligence preparation, political pressure, economic justification, humanitarian narrative, regional instability. All the elements that precede military action are present and intensifying. Whether intervention actually happens depends on decisions not yet made by people responding to events not yet occurred. But the trajectory is clear. The temperature is rising. The pressure is building. The conflict is heating up. The question isn't whether crisis is coming. The question is when it arrives and how bad it gets. The answer is probably sooner and worse than anyone wants to admit. Military readiness, oil dependency, political pressure, three factors, one nation, one crisis, heating up right now.